ECFA just recently did a webinar on cryptocurrency, and we started with a story of Granny invested in Bitcoin and now wants to give some of it to the church. So it's not just the millennials who are putting their 401ks in crypto. More than 25 million U.S. adults have something in cryptocurrency, and they want to figure out how to give it to their church. So that's going to become an increasing pathway, and I'm sure there'll be a Tithely way to help that happen somewhere down the line.
Hey guys, Frank here with another episode of Modern Church Leader. Really excited today talking with Dr. Warren Bird from ECFA. I have to sort of slow down when I say that one, but from ECFA. Warren, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks. And, you passed the test. I had to get the tattoo of ECFA. And fortunately, they just used the letters, but it stands for the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. But really, it's more than finances because, when something happens, the first question is, and where was the board and where was this? So it's a whole package, but it's umbrellaed under the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. And see how fast I said it?
I'm glad it's just ECFA, and for whatever reason, my brain wants to say EFCA. I don't know why, but it's just so I have to slow it down every time.
Well, we love the evangelical free folks. They're our friends too.
Well, it's good to have you on. This is your second time on the show, so you might be the very first second time appearance, second time on the show guest. So congratulations.
All right. No pressure. Great. Thank you.
But I love what you guys do. I know you do a lot of things. One of the things you do is you do research into the space, and you guys just published a new report on the state of giving in 2021. And you talk to a lot of churches and survey churches and have your own data and all this kind of stuff. So I'm pretty excited to talk about your findings.
Yeah, well, everybody wanted to know, what happened during the pandemic with giving. And actually, I was very busy during the pandemic. As soon as it kicked in, our boss and president said, everybody's going to want to know what's happening. So how about if every quarter you do a survey to kind of get the pulse of things like cash giving and things like cash reserves? Are people rating their cash reserves? Is this the time that, hey, we've saved for a rainy day? Is a global pandemic a rainy day? And so forth. So, we ask a lot of questions like that. What'd you do with your staff? Has that worked? Has the PPP? And we kind of followed the pandemic.
Right.
And then this was the latest where we said, okay, it's towards the end of 2021. How'd 2021 end for you?
Right.
Or how's it compare to 2020? And what's your outlook for 2022?
Right. And it's called the ECFA State of Giving 2021. So people can Google it and find the research online, I assume.
You can. And if you want the shortcut, it's ecfa.org/state of giving. One word.
Love it. Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, give us some of the highlights. What were some of the core things that you learned in this latest round of research?
All right. So first, before I get into what happened 2021 and what's looking at 2022, let's bring us up to date through 2020, because that was traumatic enough.
Yeah.
And the big news is 2.5%, which means that across the board for all of ECFA's 2,600 plus members, cash giving. Now we don't mean, I'm donating a truck. We don't mean I'm charging registration fee. We're talking about green stuff, whether given by Tithely or any other means. Cash giving went up from 1919 to 2020.
Wow.
So the first year of the pandemic, overall giving went up, and we actually historied it out 10 years. For 9 of the last 10 years, the average ECFA member's giving has crept up just a little bit, like 1%, 2%, some years 3%,
right.
Which, American evangelicals are some of the most generous people in the world. And whether it was the '08 financial collapse or bringing us up into the last decade, people have given. And frankly, with your online tithing stuff, they tend to give more and more consistently, which, is great for God's kingdom and for whatever local church or ministry there is.
Yeah.
So the first part of the report kind of tracks history of what happened, and we break it down by size and region and type of ministry and all that kind of stuff. And there's just pages and pages of fun graphs because everybody wants to know, I'm a church that's about this size.
Right.
Tell me what happened with other churches like me.
Yeah, like my cohort of churches.
Yeah, I want to know, am I normal? And if we aren't, help me understand why. And just to give you the nickel tour in like 1 minute of what happened during the pandemic for churches, and I'll spill into 2022 on this, is 2020 started as a great year. Remember, 2019 was a strong year. Stock market did well. Churches did well. It was a good year. And 2020 began with a great roll forward. And there's optimism. And then the shutdown occurred and panic occurred. And like 2 weeks in, there was a big survey, not us, but somebody else said, so how's it going? And at that moment, giving had tanked because, everybody was in panic mode and lots of people hadn't signed up for Tithely. They were still, doing the passing the plate on Sunday, which wasn't happening.
Up for Tithely right in that moment.
I can believe it. Well, and initially everybody thought, this is just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so, well, maybe we don't need to go to online giving. Well, as the weeks tipped by, they did. So about May, we took our first quarterly survey and we said, where are we? And there had been a dip and there had been already the recatching up, but not equal. So in other words, April and May were much lower than January, February, March. But then in June, the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, kicked in, and ECFA was one of the groups that said to the different congressional leaders, you need to include nonprofits. Now, whether they take government money, that's a whole nother ethical, theological issue, but you need to at least give nonprofits that option because frankly, they are the backbone. And if this pandemic goes long, which it did, if your nonprofits falter, they are your front line of support. And as we know, so many churches became distribution centers and the church that I'm part of did all kinds of outreach, with masks and everything else during the pandemic. And it was just so wonderful, if you will, but also the PPP helped so many who at that time thought, what's going to happen? Has the couple in our church that has a lot of money said, honey, we were going to give at the end of the year, but I think we should do our giving now. Or, honey, we've set aside money for the rainy day, in the DAF, the Donor Advised Fund. I think it's time to tap it. Our church or our nonprofit needs it. So it was boosted by the paid, and actually by the end of the summer, churches were in 2020 now still. We're in good shape. Then as the year went on, everybody's like, well, are they giving out? Are their jobs going to hold up?
Right.
So there was a lot of uncertainty. And yet, 2020 ended with people saying, with churches, among other nonprofits, saying, actually, we ended almost as well as we did in 2019.
Right.
And the almost as well was okay for a lot of them because they had trimmed back, if you're not meeting in person, you're not using your building as much, and there were lesser expenses. And they did tend to be able to keep their staff fully employed, in part thanks to the PPP, in part then God's people continued and picked up and the assurances came there. And so that's how 2020 ended. And that was the first part of our report kind of chronicling, all right, where did 2020 end?
Yeah. And we saw, just a quick note, like from a Tithely perspective with people giving online, and we had a lot of customers before the pandemic, and it kind of went crazy when the pandemic hit. Lots more churches had to go online. But what we saw just as a macro trend is giving actually spiked right at the beginning. Within the first kind of month or so, giving went way up for a lot of churches, and then it kind of tailed back down a little bit normal. So there was this crazy spike, and then there was the PPP stuff in different moments where there was these little smaller spikes, but it kind of like went up and then just kind of slowly kind of came back down to a more normal kind of place. So, then that's mostly like the looking at all the data for all the churches, and that can be skewed by larger churches and whatnot. But even anecdotally talking to churches, a lot of people saw giving go up in the first kind of few months and then kind of come back down as it dragged on, because people were worried about jobs and just all kinds of people losing jobs and whatever going on. But then, kind of finished the year going, we're about at budget, maybe a little more. I've heard those stories, maybe a little less, but, not completely devastated.
So it sounds like Tithely's monitoring pretty much parallels what we were tracking.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty, fairly. Maybe if we had them charted, we'd see a similar chart.
Well, we should do some tracking together in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So should we go into 2021 now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So then, after the first 3 quarters of 2021, meaning the end of September, we asked people, so how did 2021 go compared to 2020? Now, remember, 2020, as you pointed out, ended up being pretty good, all things considered. And of course, that donor fatigue, compassion fatigue, the nervousness, as you say, what's going to happen? Is my job going to be there? Can we keep giving? Will people keep giving? They're not coming to church in person. Is their heart still with us? That we're a priority in their lives, and all those uncertainties. And yet, 2021. The majority, and again, we've got all kinds of graphs and details where you can look at it, and we broke it down by different increments. But the majority said 2021 ended almost as well or better than 2020 for the same.
Oh, wow. The
first 3 quarters of 2020 compared to the first 3 quarters of 2021. 2021 was better.
Yeah.
Wow. To me, this is just such a testimony of God's people saying, oh, no. This comes first. This is a priority. That we're not cutting back unless, circumstances demand it. And even then, we're going to do what we can. We love our church. We love our Lord.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know specifically because you can't talk to every person that gives or doesn't give or anything like that. But people's jobs were affected and families were affected and all kinds of stuff happened. So of course there's people that were giving less or not able to give or whatever, but then you have this balancing by people that were able to give more and be more generous through this time, and somehow it balanced out, right? And God's church sort of prevailed through all of this from a financial perspective, was able to weather that. And I'm sure that's not true for every single church on the planet, but by and large, people were able to get through it, which is very encouraging.
Now, some did struggle, and sadly, or reality-wise, what the pandemic did is, as I understand it, is it accelerated whatever was there. So if a church was fragile going into the pandemic, if it wasn't, let's say, very outreach-minded, it didn't reach out during the pandemic. If it was fragile financially before the pandemic, that they weren't maintaining their facilities. They weren't able to keep up. They were just barely always behind. The pandemic just accelerated that. And they're coming out of the pandemic saying, well, God, what's ahead for us? Should we merge with another church? What should we do? We can't make it. And there has been an acceleration of, let's say, mergers from another study. And I can affirm that there will be going forward. But in the long run, God's people have done their best to stay faithful, and that's very encouraging.
Yeah. So, was there any in 2021 or in the research, did you guys ask churches to give any reasons why giving did well or stayed steady or declined? Like, was there any kind of reasoning behind churches' thoughts or any thoughts that they had around why giving kind of stayed stable?
I wish I had an answer to that.
Yeah.
It's all the feedback is anecdotal. There are a lot of outside data points. For example, for better or worse, giving is in direct proportion to the Standard & Poor 500. That's a research finding. Meaning, if the stock market gains 100 points, donations to all charities combined go up $1 billion.
Wow.
So, and likewise, if the stock market tanks, then the giving goes down. So we have
last
had
couple days have not been good.
Yes, and don't look at just 1 or 2 days. We're talking about the whole year. Yeah. But speaking of the last couple of days and in recent days, in the news is inflation. And, that's a whole nother bubble where people are going to say, well, does that mean my paycheck, has less buying power? And another, the report stated, again, ECFA.org/one word state of giving.
Yeah.
We look at a bunch of outside comparisons, such as the stock market, but we also look at consumer debt. I can slice the family pie paycheck up into so many slices of a pie.
Right.
And if I'm paying off debt, then it's harder to give. I'm not saying you can't. And if I have less debt, if I'm more financially free, then I got more resources that I can use to give.
Right.
And so we monitor, how has household debt, and that's gone down. But the latest wrinkle is the question of inflation, because that's going to impact giving if it continues. So while there's always something
yeah, exactly.
that can help explain it, fundamentally there's a commitment to putting God first in finances. Yeah. And that has stayed for so many people, even when they couldn't be part, as a researcher, I can tell you from other studies, the more involved you are in your church, the more you give. Well, it makes sense. If I'm a greeter, if I'm part of a small group, if I'm very involved, well, then my heart is absolutely there, and so is my wallet. Mm-hmm. So, then the question is, well, wait a minute, if people are still at home, having the donut in their pajamas and tuning on the service, which in some sections of the country, that's still happening.
Still a thing, yeah. I actually think, regardless of sections of the country, I just think churches and this kind of hybrid church thing it's here to stay, and it might be at different levels depending on the church, the actual local church in the community, but sort of globally and church at large, like hybrid church and church online and all that, is only got kind of pulled forward to where it's a real thing, and you've got folks like Life Church having church in the metaverse now, right? So
yeah,
all of that stuff is definitely here to stay in some form.
And by the way, I'm going to have news on that. On February 22nd, 2022 at 2:22 in the afternoon, ECFA is launching what will be the largest ever study of church planting. The starting of new churches, and it will include a comparison to multi-site campuses, because that's a church. They're both multiplication vehicles.
Right.
And in that, we're asking, how are you doing church today, and what are you exploring for tomorrow? And I just modified the survey to include metaverse
right. Perfect.
as one of the options, and hybrid and everything else, because really, as newer churches and to some extent multi-site campuses, which have a little more flexibility than the main campus, if you want to use that word, as they explore and find ways to connect with people, then we're probably going to see new hybrid combinations come out, and we'll do some reports and all and maybe I'll be your third guest then to talk about the findings of the report,
Round 3.
because that impacts giving and involvement and everything else. But I am absolutely convinced that the face, in fact, that's what we're calling the survey, the new faces of church planting, that the face is a very exciting future, as God's people use God's creativity to say, all right, how do we take church to where people are? How do we speak the timeless gospel in a way that people today, it speaks to their needs? So we will see. And Tithely will be all along the way, because you have to fund the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Did you ask in the report anything related to like financial giving to churches and how the funds were coming in? Like, did you get any insight into, cash and check versus digital versus, I don't know, crypto, like, an understanding of the churches through the pandemic, and if kind of how people are giving changed at all, or how churches are seeing funds come in? Did any of that change?
I did not, because so many other surveys have clearly documented the skyrocketing pace of online giving. And so many churches that had it as kind of a backdoor, now it's the primary way that so many churches, large and small, give. However, you mentioned one other thing. ECFA just recently did a webinar on cryptocurrency and the 3 best ways to set up cryptocurrency. We had an executive pastor from a church, talk about his experience.
Nice.
And by the way, you can download that, go to ecfa.org/webinars, plural, and watch it for free. I think you have to give your email to do it. But there are, and we started with a story of Granny invested in Bitcoin and now wants to give some of it to the church.
Yeah.
So it's not just the millennials who are putting their 401ks in crypto, which they are disproportionately. But there are a lot of, I think at last count, it was more than 25 million U.S. adults have something in cryptocurrency.
Right.
And they want to figure out how to give it to their church. So that's going to become an increasing pathway. And I'm sure there'll be a Tithely way to help that happen somewhere down the line.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And we actually have a great partner named In Given who does crypto giving for churches.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a growing thing. I've gotten more questions about it, over the last 12 months by far, than any period before that. So as crypto is exploding and like NFTs and metaverse and just doing things digitally and using crypto, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin or some other coin to transact, it's a thing. And I think churches are starting to pay attention a little bit more, there's a little bit more interest every year. Not a lot of dollars coming in yet, that best I can tell. I mean, I don't really know, but I think there's more and more interest in that. And obviously as people start having more and more money into these digital assets, they'll, if they have gains and they want to give, they're going to want to give straight out of their, Coinbase account with Bitcoin to their church. So churches are going to have to start to support that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So
there are multiple ways that people want to give, and that's going to be an increasing challenge, which will create an ongoing need for groups like Tithely.
Yeah. What other things? I mean, we kind of talked about the macro. Is there any other key things in the report?
But I have to say, but wait, there's more. We only got through the end of 2021. We also said
we're going to go to this year.
So, what's your outlook for 2022?
Okay, you asked them how they're feeling about 2022.
Well, yeah, and I gave them 3 choices. Are you optimistic? Looking at the first 3 months of 2022, how do you feel about cash giving? Are you optimistic, uncertain, or pessimistic? And the majority were optimistic. The second group was uncertain, and the third group was pessimistic.
Yeah.
And again, you can get actual specific percentage numbers by getting the report ecfa.org/state of giving. But to me, that's been very encouraging. And so far this year, I mean, start with the Thanksgiving giving day was the best by far, and end of year was strong. Yeah. And the early indicators that I've seen about actual giving trends in 2022 across the charitable world and a few in the church world in particular, it's affirming. So we'll see what happens. But our word to so many churches is, okay, yeah, maybe you need to do 2 budgets, an actual and a fallback if need, or a faith budget, or however you want to frame them. But this is a time for ministry. People need Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't hunker down. Don't circle the wagons. You got funds. What funds you have, pursue. And if you're one of those handful of churches that's really struggling, ask for help. You know, whether it's a merger or any other way to reach out. We've got some months yet to go in recovering from the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean it's still going strong, right? So, what is it? I don't know. I don't even know what year of the pandemic we're on anymore. It just keeps stacking up, and it keeps morphing. So churches have to sort of navigate this ongoing thing, and it's pretty challenging. But it's encouraging to hear that giving and generosity is still going strong, because that, you know, churches being financially stable lets them do their work in the community, right? And stay open and help people. And, you know, with lots of people going through some pretty tough times, right? Being able to kind of minister to folks in the community is a big deal.
So ECFA has kind of 2 doors to help churches and ministry leaders in that way. First is kind of the free level, and we call that churchexcel.org. Mm-hmm. And basically, you want to download, how to prepare for an internal audit, or 3 best ways to rebuild your cash reserves. Or there's a lot of church administration and management. How do you set up the clergy housing allowance legally and ethically?
Yeah.
It's all there for you for free. And this is our heart to serve churches of every size, whether you're officially connected with us or not. The next level is like the ECFA accredited member. And where that came from was 42 years ago, there was a televangelist scandal at a church, and some senators went to Billy Graham and said, look, either you guys police yourselves or we will, meaning we'll pass laws.
Right.
And Billy Graham got together World Vision's Ted Engstrom and a bunch of other evangelical leaders and said, well, you know, the Bible says a lot about integrity and being above reproach. Yeah. Let's set high standards.
Right.
And let's say anybody who wants to agree to these standards and have someone look over their shoulder to affirm that they're really practicing them, they can be part of what became ECFA, Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. And then you get the Good Housekeeping seal and all. And what that will do is build confidence and trust in donors to say, yes, I feel great about giving to, this church, this Christian ministry, because where they say my money's going, that's where it's going. Right. And, they have a board that's a board of integrity. It's not the pastor's family members all deciding, and, they're doing things the right way. We love pastors' families, but that's not the right way to set up a board. Let's vote on Dad's salary. I think he should get a raise. What about you, sister?
Yeah.
So sorry about that.
That's going to cause some drama. So, what Are you guys going to continue this trend, like do the report quarterly? So at the end of
Q1, we won't do the quarterly, how things are going, but at the end of 2022, we'll do the same thing. We'll do State of Giving 2022. We'll look back, how have 2 years of the pandemic impacted, and we'll do a forecast to 2023. Again, free download, our way of helping, because see, people want to know, is what I'm experiencing normal? We saw that especially early in the pandemic, like in June and July, when, as you said, it initially dipped and then it started picking back up. And pastors were almost embarrassed. It's like, I hate to say it, but, we've really picked back up. Should I say that too loud? Because, how hurting are my friends? And we said, no, that's happening for a lot of people. Right. It's a good thing. You can talk about it.
Yeah.
That was a big help to them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it'll be exciting to see the next report. 2022 is going to be, I'm sure, another crazy year. But it's good just to see the research you guys are doing and kind of spread the word. So say it one more time. Where can folks go to download the report?
ECFA.org/ one word, State of Giving. STATE of Giving.
And I'm sure, if you forget that, just Google ECFA.
Just Google it. Yeah.
ECFA State of Giving, and it'll pop. I'm sure it'll be result number one.
Google it. Google me.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say this on air, but my wife and I are leading a Bible study at our church, and we were recruiting. We got to do an announcement. I thought, how can I said, just Google Warren Bird phone, and the first thing listed will be my phone number. And it's like, it's nothing private anymore.
Yeah, it's all out there.
It's all out there. You can find whatever you need. ECFA wants to help you. We've got like almost 1,000 free documents and webinars and all that. So don't reinvent the wheel. Let us help train you to do integrity well and build trust with your people.
Yeah, love that. Well, Warren, it's great to have you on today.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate you. Appreciate Tithely. And Tithely has grown a bit during the pandemic. Do you want to, do you mind saying how much it's grown?
No, not at all. We, if you go all the way back to when it hit in, what was that, March of
2020.
2020, yeah. We were adding about 1,000 new churches a day on the platform. So we saw churches, that were kind of cash and check in the offering plate was the way they'd collected donations, and people were giving, and that's just been how it's happened for, I don't even know, 50, 100 years, right? That's just what's been happening. And the pandemic, all of a sudden people are at home, they can't come in the building, so they can't give. And those churches that were maybe a little bit on the fence or reluctant to have digital giving said, man, now it's kind of mission critical to raising money to fund the church and the work we're doing in the community and all that. So, man, we saw thousands and thousands within a few weeks. We added, well over 10,000 new churches on the platform, and shockingly, it slowed off from that kind of craziness. But even to this day, we still get churches signing up, and we send kind of a welcome email out, and we ask them, hey, how'd you hear about Tithely, and why'd you decide to add online giving? And we still get churches to this day saying, oh, we're kind of needing to add online giving because people want to give that way during this time. And I'm like, we're 2 years into this thing, and you're just now.
Where have you been?
Yeah. What is
how have you paid the bills?
Yeah. So yeah, Tithely, we well over doubled. We serve now close to 36,000 churches in 50 some odd countries, and have a few hundred staff. So it's been a crazy time. As a company, we feel really grateful that God just put on our hearts to build something that's been very useful to the church during this period, and hopefully we keep building great products that serve churches well into the future. So, yeah, crazy times.
We worship a God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and whatever enables God's people to bring those gifts to the altar.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Amen to that. Well, Warren, we will have you back. Thank you for coming on the show. Thanks everyone for watching or listening, whether you're tuning in on Apple Podcast or watching the YouTube channel. Grateful for you guys. We'll be back with another episode of Modern Church Leader next week. So tune in a week from today. We'll see you guys.